Hey friends, welcome to another live video. I wanted to address a great question that was left last week about how do we not dismiss our own struggles in the midst of whatever is going on in the world, and how does that really tie back into the conversation we were having about holding ourselves to a higher standard. And such a great question, is something I've thought a lot about in my own healing as well. And this is a totally different situation, I'm not trying to compare with what's going on in the world right now, but when I was grieving after my loss and I had PTSD, and then I was in a really not awesome and abusive relationship in the aftermath of that because of the PTSD, and even in the year that followed that. So for about 3 years after my loss, I had been through quite a lot. I had a lot of physical ailments that really slowed me down. I was still working to get my brain online. I was trying to make sense of my life. My business was failing. I was dealing with the financial aftermath of that. So there was a lot going on in my own world. And before all of this happened, I had been very active and vocal and focused on environmental issues and really doing a lot of different things to align my life and business with caring for our earth and the planet and nature and animals. And that was just one thing that when I experienced my loss and the trauma and the PTSD and everything that followed, that just fell away. There was no room. I had no capacity to even think about it. Part of that was my brain. Part of that was because I was in survival mode. And so that is one of the key things to know. And before I really dig into this, I also want to say that both context and discernment are really key in a conversation like this. What is the context of what it is that you're going through, and what is the context of what is going on in the world with regard to you asking how do you make the decision and how do you not dismiss your own struggles in relation to what's going on? Context is king, and we so often leave that out of these conversations. Context, 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 and discernment. Only you are going to know where you're at and what decisions you need to make for yourself and for the world at large. Nobody can make those decisions for you. It's very easy to go black and white. It's very easy to say it should look a certain way. It's very easy for other people to think that they know what's going on for you. You are the only person who knows. So context and discernment are key. Now here's the thing with what is going on in the world right now in regards to race and Black Lives Matter and defunding the police and really creating massive change inside of systems that need to go and need to be different, right? There is big upheaval in the world right now. And so regardless of what is going on in our personal lives, this is something that we all have to look at in ourselves and address 100%. Now, there's no one right way to do that. The way that I am able to do that in my life and my work is going to be different from how you are, how you want to, what fits with what you're doing and where you spend your money and all of these things. So it's important to, again, remember context. What is right for one person is not what's going to be right for you, but this is work that we all need to be doing. Now, in relation to whatever struggles you might be going through, you have to really be tuned into what is right for you. So it's a discernment piece again. How are you able to incorporate this work right now? It might be really small things. It might just be keeping up with what's being shared on social media. It might be watching the news from not every major media source, but finding a good place to get updates. It might be having conversations. It might be reading books. It might be watching documentaries. It might be going out and protesting. It might be doing bigger things and investing a lot of money. But what are the things that you can do right now, knowing that this is something that we all must look at while considering what you're actually going through? So another example, and this is not something that came up, but let's say after my loss, there had been some kind of rally or big thing around suicide loss and really having a deep conversation about it. There is no way that I could have been productive in a conversation like that. It would have been incredibly triggering to the point that it would have re-traumatized me and I would not have been useful. Now, that's not something that was actually going on, and it's kind of the best example I can give from my own trauma and things I've been through. But I know that if I had been asked to go into certain situations or experiences, all they would have done is re-traumatize me. And if we're traumatized or re-traumatizing ourselves, that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't make us effective. It doesn't create change. It just creates more chaos internally, and it hurts us more, and we're not able to really contribute to the things that we care about. What I did do in my own time and in the way that worked for me was I learned more about depression and suicide loss. I learned so much about trauma and healing, about spirituality and purpose, and all of these things that really helped me move through and make sense of what I had been through, and have since, as you've seen, incorporated it into my work in a way that impacts other people and impacts the world. Those initial ways that I did the work were small, they were personal, they were individual, and they were pretty private. I did write and I did talk about things, but I kept them close to my heart as I navigated things, and I was very, very careful as I learned more about where I was at and what I was going through and what I needed, not to put myself in situations that re-traumatized me. So again, context, not at all the same as what's going on in the world right now, nor was the example I started with about losing sight of the part of me that was very environmentally focused, very active and vocal about that internally in my own life and my business and everything that I did, and realizing that I had lost that because of what I went through. So not directly related to what's going on in the world, but just some examples to help you out. Context. What is it that you are struggling with? What is the capacity that you have right now around the things that you must focus on that are going on in the world? And what's the balance? Don't put yourself in situations that re-traumatize you. Don't do things that will cause you to be ineffective for yourself and your own life and for the greater cause and the world at large. So really that discernment piece is going to be key. And the other thing about discernment that I want to say is around holding ourselves to a higher standard. There can be, not always, there can be a point at which we get so stuck in our focus on survival, in our trauma, in our wounding, in our fears, that we start to use it as an excuse. Now, again, discernment. I'm not saying that that's what's happening for you or anyone else. Only you are going to know that. I realized at certain points that I had become comfortable and almost set in certain ways around my trauma and my grief and my healing, that I was actually getting in the way of progressing further and being able to do more in my work, in my life, in my relationships. And so that is the discernment piece that we really have to bring to the table when we have the context of what is my personal situation and what's going on in the world and what's needed right now is, where am I really at? Sometimes it's hard for some of us to admit that we're really, really like deep in the muck of it and we are not capable of doing half the things that we are trying to do. We can barely get out of bed. Like sometimes that's the thing that we're not able to admit to ourselves, is that, wow, I'm really down in the dark and twisties right now. I am really not capable of showing up. I would be ineffective. This is not good for anyone. Like, here's what I need to do, and here's what I can do to support the things that I care about still. And there are times when we have to say, okay, yes, I have this struggle, I have this trauma, I have this whatever it is. I'm at a point that I need to do deeper work to push my edges and move through it, and to not let it be a thing that holds me back anymore. And that often happens because of our subconscious programming. Even if we're not happy in a really crappy situation or a really challenging way of being, it's known and familiar. So discernment, I can't stress that enough. Only you are going to know where you're at within that and what decisions you need to make to either slow your roll and focus on yourself and your struggles and what's going on for you, or push your edges a bit so that you can do more, be more, have more of an impact, show up in different ways that you haven't yet. Only you're going to know that, and I can't stress that enough. So hopefully this is helpful for some of you. If you have further questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, context and discernment. So if you have a specific question around, this is my struggle and this is what I see going on in the world and how I want to show up, but I don't know how to do that without invalidating myself or putting myself in a situation to re-traumatize myself or being ineffective because I'm hurting myself in some way. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of creativity. Sometimes it is saying, okay, I see what is happening. I acknowledge it. I'm not burying my head in the sand. I'm not looking away because I don't want to deal with it. But I know where I'm at and what I'm capable of and not. And then very intentionally asking yourself, when will you revisit this topic and in what way? And holding yourself to that, holding yourself accountable to, this is important, this is something I need to do, these are ways that I know I can start. Right now I am spun out, I am triggered, I am having PTSD flashbacks, I'm so grief-stricken that I can't get out of bed. I'm going to remind myself in a week, in a month, that these are things that I want to do and these are things that are important. And so for me, in terms of who I was before my grief and trauma, I have had to very intentionally reincorporate those aspects of myself in my daily life, in my business, and kind of get to know that part of me again and ask myself who I am now. How do I want to show up in relation to what I say is important to me, the causes that matter, the things going on in the world that I can't sit back and not do anything about. And so it's this constant dialogue with yourself, along with everything else that we're reorienting to in the aftermath of grief and trauma and big life transitions. It's this constant reorienting process. And so context, discernment, only you will really know where you're at and what you need to do or what you need to stop doing. And trust yourself in that. Get outside feedback and perspective if you need it, but trust yourself to know, as long as you're willing to be honest, trust yourself to know where you're at, what you can do right now, and what are the things that you need to stop doing, and what are the things that you're going to revisit at a later date when you're more able to. All right, let me know if I can answer any other questions, and I will be back soon in another video.